you're tuning into something different, something deeper. Welcome to a space where the unseen becomes seen, where the patterns beneath reality are decoded. This isn't just a podcast, it's a journey into the mechanics of belief, perception, and the multidimensional truths shaping our world. If you've ever felt like an outsider looking in, questioning the systems you're told to follow, you're in the right place. This is The Outcast, the Pattern Podcast. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're shifting focus a bit. We often talk about dark patterns in tech, those tricky website designs.
Right, the manipulative pop-ups and hidden fees.
Exactly. But today we're going deeper, looking at a kind of foundational, almost philosophical dark pattern, one etched into power itself.
Yeah, we're digging into a really seminal work, Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince. Many see it as, well, a blueprint for some pretty ruthless ways to gain and keep control.
And the source material we looked at doesn't mince words, does it? Calling it things like a ritual invocation for domination.
Mm-hmm. And a black diamond buried in the ruins of Western virtue.
Wow. Also, a cold-blooded scripture of secular domination. It sounds chilling.
It is, frankly. And just to be clear, our mission here isn't to hold this up as admirable. Quite the opposite.
Right. We want to unpack this dark pattern of thinking, understand its logic, its moving parts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because by dissecting it, we can actually learn a lot about recognizing manipulative behavior and maybe, more importantly, learn about what not to do on a big scale, but also maybe personally.
Okay, so let's start excavating this black diamond. What's the absolute bedrock of this thinking?
Well, fundamentally, it's the idea that power is everything, the ultimate goal, and achieving it, holding on to it, that often means ditching traditional ethics.
So morality gets in the way.
Pretty much. And one of our sources puts it for Machiavelli, ethics is not part of politics. It is its greatest liability. He saw being consistently virtuous as a major weakness in the political arena.
That's quite a statement. Why did he think being consistently good was such a disadvantage for a leader?
Well, Machiavelli was working with a very pragmatic view of the world, maybe even cynical.
Okay.
He basically argued that the world is often cruel and people are often self-serving, so a leader needs to deal with that reality.
Not some ideal version of how things should be.
Exactly. Sticking rigidly to moral principles when others aren't. Well, in his view, that just sets you up to fail.
Which leads directly into that famous bit about being loved versus feared, doesn't it?
It does. A classic Machiavelli point. He says, ideally, sure, be both. But if you have to choose, fear is the safer bet.
Safer?
Yeah. The quote our source uses is, if you cannot be loved, then be feared, but never ever be hated.
Ah, okay. So fear, not hate.
Crucial distinction. He goes on, love is unpredictable, fear is reliable.
Why was he so suspicious of love as a political tool?
Because he thought love, obligation, gratitude, those things are flimsy. People will break those bonds if it suits their self-interest. Fear, though, especially the fear of punishment, that's a motivator you can count on, according to him.
But not hatred. Why draw the line there?
Because hatred breeds rebellion. It can unite people against you. So fear keeps people in line, but hatred pushes them over the edge. It's a fine line to walk.
It's so calculated. Just pure, cold pragmatism, stripping away any higher ideals.
Absolutely. And that calculation seems rooted in a very specific worldview, one without much room for the divine.
Right. He was operating in a very secular frame.
Totally. He pretty much dismisses divine law, sacred truth, any kind of inherent moral order, at least when it comes to politics.
So it's all about human desires.
Yes, the sources state it clearly. To Machiavelli, there is no divine order, no justice, no sacred truth, only desire and the discipline to satisfy it.
Wow. And another quote.
No God, no eternal law, only human appetites, political survival, and the primal drive for control. It really removes any external moral compass.
So the ruler isn't answering to God or some universal justice, just the need to survive politically.
That's the implication. If you remove that higher authority, well, the only thing left to judge your actions by is, does it work? Does it keep you in power?
Which must have felt quite radical at the time.
Oh, absolutely. It allows for a completely different kind of moral calculus based purely on outcomes, not intentions or divine rules.
And this feeds into his concept of virtue, which doesn't sound like virtue as we usually mean it.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Yeah, virtue for Machiavelli isn't moral goodness. It's more like strength, decisiveness, cunning, adaptability, even ruthlessness if needed.
It's about willpower. being effective no matter what.
Exactly. It's the raw ability to impose your will on situations, to master fortune, often using methods that, yeah, we'd consider unethical.
The source mentions Cesar Borgia.
Right. The example given is Borgia murdering his own brother. Machiavelli apparently saw that as exemplary.
Exemplary. That's disturbing.
It is. But it shows how far removed his virtue is from traditional virtue. It demonstrates that raw, decisive, maybe even brutal will to power he admired.
It really highlights the clash between his idea of effectiveness and, well, basic human decency.
It does. For Machiavelli, if a brutal act secures your power or stabilizes the state, then it demonstrates virtue. The ends justify the means.
You can sort of see echoes of that thinking sometimes, can't you? Leaders may be prioritizing results over methods.
Definitely. That rationalization, I had to do it for the greater good, or just, I had to do it to survive, that's very Machiavellian in spirit.
And then there's that really nasty bit of advice, the double cross.
Ugh, yes. This is peak cynicism, really.
Explain that one.
Okay, so the idea is you need some dirty work done. Cruel stuff, unpopular decisions, you get a subordinate, maybe a lieutenant, to do it for you.
Okay.
Then once the cruelty is done and people are angry, you eliminate that subordinate. Publicly, maybe, to win back favor. The source quotes the tactic. Send a man to execute your cruelty, then have him executed to win the people's praise.
Good grief. That's incredibly manipulative. Sacrifice your own guy to look good.
It's pure manipulation of public perception, treating people, even your own agents, as disposable pawns. Morality becomes just theater.
And that suggests a really low opinion of people in general, doesn't it? That they'd fall for that.
Absolutely. It stems from this bleak view of human nature. He seemed to think people are fundamentally self-interested, easily swayed by appearances, quick to blame.
The source even used the word bestial.
It did, suggesting maybe a view that humans aren't that far removed from basic animal drives, easily manipulated by fear and spectacle.
So if you believe that about people, then maybe these dark patterns start to look like the only way to lead effectively, in his mind.
That seems to be the internal logic, yes. If humanity's fundamentally flawed, self-serving, and maybe a bit dim, then fear, deception, the double cross, they start looking less like ethical failures and more like, well, necessary tools of the trade.
Which leads back to the ends justify the means idea. If the goal is stability and power, any tool is potentially valid.
Within his framework, yes. That's the chilling consistency of it.
Okay, wow. We've waded through some pretty dark territory here. So let's shift gears slightly. What's the point for us listening to this? Why spend time dissecting something so negative?
That's a great question. I think the real value isn't in admiring Machiavelli, obviously, but in understanding the anatomy of this kind of manipulation.
What's so?
Because he lays it bare, doesn't he? The strategies, the mindset, the justifications. By studying this really extreme, dark pattern, we get better at spotting similar things elsewhere.
Even if they're more subtle.
Especially if they're more subtle. In politics, sure, but also maybe in the workplace, in relationships, anywhere power dynamics are at play. It's about building that pattern recognition.
Right. It's like learning how a particular toxin works. Not so you can use it, but so you can recognize it and build immunity.
That's a perfect analogy, and one source actually frames it that way. His work is a warning disguised as a weapon.
A warning disguised as a weapon. I like that.
It goes on. He exposes what we become when we abandon all higher truths, when we strip governance of conscience and dress it in the garments of wolves.
So by staring into this abyss, so to speak, we get a clearer picture of what healthy interaction or healthy leadership isn't.
It clarifies the boundaries.
Yeah.
And maybe on a more personal level, too.
How do you mean?
Well, understanding these dynamics might help make sense of past experiences. Times maybe you encountered manipulation, or even, perhaps uncomfortably, times you might have used similar tactics yourself, maybe without fully realizing it.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, the source talks about how this detailed look at a dark pattern can help address old wounds within the self. By understanding the pattern, you get clarity. You see the mechanism.
And that clarity allows you to consciously choose differently next time, reject those patterns.
That's the hope. It gives you a framework for understanding and moving towards healthier ways of relating and operating.
So this whole deep dive, it's not about saying Machiavelli was right. It's about using his work as a case study almost, a stark illustration of a powerful, disturbing approach to power.
Exactly. So we can be better equipped to recognize it and resist it in our own world.
Which brings us right back to the present day, doesn't it?
It really does. And it leaves us with that very pointed question from the source material. In today's world, where political deceit is as common as air, we must ask, are we already living in Machiavelli's universe?
Oof. That's a heavy question to end on. Makes you think about where we draw our own lines, what we accept.
It does. But understanding these patterns, even uncomfortable historical ones like this, hopefully empowers us. It helps us make more conscious, more ethical choices.
Choices about how we act and what we expect from others, from our leaders.
Definitely. Cultivating that awareness is key.
So if you wish to walk the path of power, beware. Machiavelli does not offer peace or love or legacy. He offers the crown forged in cruelty, sustained by fear, and bathed in shadow.
Until next time, stay aware, stay discerning, and beware the prince who smiles.